And so if you have a copy of God's Word, open up God's Word. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 8, and we're going to be looking at verses 18 through 22. Matthew 8, 18 through 22. We're in our series. We came out of that for a tiny bit last week, of course, but we're in our series called Kingdom Power back in Matthew, and we're going to see Jesus working and displaying the power of the King. If you remember in chapters 5, 6, and 7, Jesus was up on the mountain and he was giving what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where he was teaching what it looks like for his people to live. What does it look like for Christians to live in the grace of God? And now he's showing us that he truly is the King, and he's displaying his power, first and foremost, to the ones who were there. His disciples get to see it. And so let's look at Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. It says this: "Now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to depart to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Then a scribe came and said to him, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.' And Jesus said to him, 'The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.' Another of the disciples said to him, 'Lord, permit me first to go and bury my father.' But Jesus said to him, 'Follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead.' When he got into the boat, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being covered with the waves. But Jesus himself was asleep. And they came to him and woke him up, saying, 'Save us, Lord, we are perishing.' And he said to them, 'Why are you afraid, you men of little faith?' Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. The men were amazed and said, 'What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?'" Let's pray. Lord, we have opened your word, and we have heard you speaking to us through Matthew, your servant, who wrote down exactly what you had him to write down. And as we hear your words, King Jesus, we pray that you would do what you were doing with your disciples, Lord, with us, your disciples, that you would grow our faith, that you would help us to know what it means to follow you, what it looks like to be your disciples, to be a Christian. And Lord, help us to follow you everywhere you go, anywhere you tell us to go, doing anything you tell us to do. And God, I pray, help me, Lord, and help everyone in the hearing of my voice to put you first and to be willing to say no to anything else that hinders us from doing your will. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, I'm pretty sure that if you are a Christian, then like me, you have experienced something that we call a mountaintop experience. If you are a Christian, you've probably experienced this where you feel the presence of God. You have felt the nearness of God. You felt him close. And it's this moment that you've experienced where God is working in your life and you just are overjoyed by the presence of God right there, right then and there. As a youth pastor, we used to talk about this all the time because we would take students away to youth camp and we would try to have this mountaintop experience. And unfortunately, we would get in our minds, especially students would get in their minds, that the mountaintop experience is what Christianity is like every day. And that is not true at all. Because being a Christian isn't simply about having a mountaintop experience Sunday after Sunday, chasing some sort of emotional feeling from God. That's not what it's all about. That does happen. You do experience God in really powerful ways, but that's not what it's all about. No, Christianity is about trusting Jesus through the thick and thin of life, following him wherever he goes, wherever he sends you, no matter what the circumstances are, and no matter how you feel. That's what being a Christian is really all about. It's about saying no to yourself and saying yes to him. That's what Christianity is all about. And what's awesome is Jesus doesn't sugarcoat it. You know, many times in ministries, people like to make it seem like you become a Christian and then everything goes your way. Everything you could ever want in life happens. And it's like, what kind of salespeople are we here? That's not what we're doing here. Jesus didn't do that. He made it abundantly clear what it meant to follow him. And so that's what you see in this text. And let's be honest with each other, shall we? It's scary to fully follow Jesus, because we know from this text and many others like it that to follow Jesus for real, okay? Listen, throwing a name on yourself, throwing Christian onto yourself and showing up at church from time to time doesn't make you a Christian. Just like you've heard this before, calling yourself a car and sitting in a garage doesn't make you a motor vehicle. We need to really think about this, because I am burdened for Christians around the world. I don't want anyone to call themselves something that they're not. And we know that this is scary. It's scary to follow Jesus because it takes sacrifice. We have to die to ourselves. It literally means, no, you will not get everything that you think that you want. No, you won't when you follow Christ. But here's what you will see. You see, when you do say no to yourself and you say yes to him, his power will be put on display in your life. And you will experience his power, and he will calm your fears and grow your faith. This is what we see him doing with his disciples in an extremely obvious way, but this is what he's doing in our lives all the time. And listen, I said it in my small group this morning. If none of you hear anything that I'm saying this morning, this sermon is for me. I need to hear this, and I'm pretty sure there are more people in this room who need to hear this too. So I hope that you will hear and you will let God work in your life as I'm trying to let him work in mine, to calm our fears and grow our faith. So, you remember how I said he doesn't sugarcoat it? Jesus does not beat around the bush or hide his expectations. And this is our first point that we see in this first interaction with this scribe. The first point is this, that Christ's commitment sets our expectations. We see Jesus in verse 18 and 20. He says, let's go across the sea. The crowds are gathering in because he's just worked some miracles and people are just coming in on him, and he's like, guys, let's go across Galilee. Across the Sea of Galilee, we've got some stuff we need to do. Let's get into the boats. And they're like, okay. And you can just imagine guys getting ready. These are fishermen. Many of his disciples, the 12, many of them were fishermen. And so you can just imagine them getting to work. But this one guy, this scribe, because it's not only the 12, so don't think there's only 12 guys there. There's like a bunch of people who want to follow Jesus are there. They've been seeing his miracles. And the scribe comes to him, and look at what he says in verse 19. The scribe came and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." You want to go across the Sea of Galilee? Let's do that. And Jesus says this thing to make it abundantly clear to the scribe what he is saying he will do. The foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What's going on? See, this scribe, this man who would have known the Old Testament like better than the back of his hand, okay? He probably had it memorized. This scribe is seeing something in Jesus, and he recognizes that this man is amazing. He's the best teacher he's ever seen. He's got miracles from God, but he doesn't know fully who Jesus really is, and he really doesn't know exactly what it means to follow him. He's thinking, yeah, let's go across the Sea of Galilee. Wherever you want to go, I'm there. But Jesus shows him what he should actually expect. He uses this term, Son of Man. It's the first time we hear it in the book of Matthew. And for us, we've been in church, Son of Man, we sing it in songs, cool, whoop-de-doo. But for this scribe, the phrase Son of Man would have been like, what did you just say? You just called yourself the Son of Man. Why is this important? Because the scribe would have immediately thought of Daniel. He would have immediately, maybe us in here, we wouldn't have maybe immediately thought that, but he would, and he would have remembered the prophecy of Daniel from Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14. Listen to what Daniel wrote some hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus came. It says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like the Son of Man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples and nations and every man of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. In 3 words, Son of Man, Jesus just communicated to this scribe who he really is. And that scribe would have said, whoa, this is a big deal. So now I know who I'm really following. But this Son of Man who will be presented to the King of glory, God of the Ancient of Days, he will be given dominion and power. He is the one true King. He will be in charge of all the earth. How? And maybe like many others, the scribe would have thought to himself, yeah, we're going to take over Rome, and we're going to just like lay waste to all of our enemies. And this guy, he's the king. Let's do it. Yeah, I'll definitely follow you everywhere you go. And Jesus, he said what though about the Son of Man? He didn't say, yeah, that's right. We're going to set up armies, and we're going to set up territories, and we're going to take this place over. Let's go. That's not what Jesus said. He said, foxes and birds have a more comfortable life than I will have. Are you ready to go where I'm about to go? Why? Because you see, Jesus is the Almighty King of the world, but he came on a mission. He came with a commitment to get his job done. And what was that job? What was his mission? It was to purchase his kingdom. It was to purchase his kingdom for his people by the shedding of his own blood. He became the one he is the king of every tribe, tongue, and nation, because he died for every tribe, tongue, and nation. And he has purchased them for himself so that when he goes before the Ancient of Days, he is seated at the right hand of the Ancient of Days. His Father would say, well done. These are your people. And he tells this man, right now, I don't have anywhere to lay my head. I don't have a home. I'm not here to build this kingdom on earth like you might think. I'm not here to make your life comfortable. My life isn't going to be comfortable and easy. I am not here to do all the things that you might think I'm here to do. Instead, I am here to save sinners from hell and from death. And Jesus was telling this scribe that his mission must conform to Christ's mission if he is really to follow him. What's the expectation? Your life has to be about the gospel. That's it. See, what is the cause of disappointment in our lives? What's really the cause of our disappointment? When we feel disappointed, what is it? It's unfulfilled expectations. And what's great about our faith is that we're given the expectations up front. I was just at Disney, all right? And when you're waiting in line, a really long line, for a really awesome new ride that you've never been on before, you're excited. I was getting ready to ride Tron, okay? I love the movie. I'm ready for the ride. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. It's a roller coaster. I love roller coasters. And so now does my 5-year-old son. It's great. So I'm getting ready to ride this ride, and we're all the way to the front. We are watching them blast off, okay? And we're getting so excited, and then all of a sudden, we're sorry, people. The ride, blah, 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 is broken down. That's all I heard. That was it. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. So we're going to wait for 15 minutes. And every time they announce it, every 5-10 minutes, they announce it again, and more people leave. And finally, we were like, okay, let's go. Disappointed. Because I had these expectations to experience this amazing thing, and I waited for it, but I didn't get to experience it. That time, I did go back. So anyways. But seriously, when you expect something, like maybe you expect your spouse to do something, like, whoa, Pastor Brian, whoa, you were talking about roller coasters. Why you got to go there? Hey, it's real life. When you're expecting something from your spouse, but let's say you never communicate, that would never happen, right? You would never not communicate your expectations to your spouse. Okay, but let's just pretend that happened. You maybe didn't communicate your expectations to your spouse. What's going to happen? Disappointed. That's what's going to happen. And even sometimes when you do communicate and your expectations aren't filled, disappointed. But that's not what's happening in our faith, y'all. See, Jesus tells us what to expect from the very beginning. When you follow Jesus, your life is about the gospel. And when we think that our life is supposed to be full of other things, it's supposed to be about other things, and it doesn't work out that way, and we are disappointed, it's not because we didn't know the expectations, it's because we are not living within the expectations. You see, what's amazing is most of the time, you're going to get to use your own unique gifts and desires. But those gifts and desires are no longer for your own pleasure. Now, everything about you as a Christian is focused on leveraging your whole life for the name of Jesus. That's what it means to be a Christian, to follow him. And often that looks like going places, doing things, and talking to people that you would never choose to do on your own. Sometimes it means you're going to do things that you would never think you would want to do. But you will find that when you are walking in the will of the Lord, it's exactly where you want to be, even though it's not always easy. So what's your focus? What are you expecting from your life with Christ? What are you expecting in your job? What are you expecting in your house? What are you expecting from your vehicle? What are you expecting from your hobbies? What are you expecting from your children? What are you expecting from this, that, and the other? Are you expecting to live every aspect of your life for Jesus Christ? Or are you trying to use those other things for yourself? That's something we all have to think about. Because here's what we're going to find. To truly follow Christ, his call requires our priority. That's point number 2. Christ's call requires our priority. Look at verses 21 and 22. Another disciple, we don't know who this disciple is. We don't really know anything about their background. Some people would say he's not one of the 12. I have no reason. This might have been one of the 12 apostles. We don't really know. We don't know how he responded after. We don't know how the scribe responded. Maybe the scribe continued with Jesus. But what we know are the principles Jesus lays down. But in verse 21, another disciple said to him, "Lord, permit me first to go and bury my father." Seems like a reasonable request. We'll get to that in a second. But Jesus said to him, "Follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead." Jesus just loves to say funny things like that. He just says all sorts of things that are like, what does that even mean? Like, how do dead people bury dead people? Well, obviously he's speaking figuratively, isn't he? Let's think about this. You see, the call to follow Jesus, which, time out, how do we follow Jesus? I mean, have you seen Jesus physically? Because I've never seen Jesus physically before. So how do I follow him? I want to make sure I'm very clear. What I'm saying when I say follow Jesus, I'm saying this. I'm saying that you believe the gospel, that Jesus died for your sins. I'm saying that you are walking in your faith. You are practicing your faith. You are growing in your faith. And I'm saying that you are doing everything in your power to obey Jesus' commands. That's how you follow Jesus. Okay? You believe the gospel, you are growing in your faith, and you're doing everything in your power to obey his commands. That's following Jesus. That's being a disciple. He says to this one disciple, the most important thing in your entire life is following me. It's the most important thing by far, by leaps and bounds. See, this disciple is not simply asking to just go to a funeral, okay? This disciple is asking for more, and that's why we need to understand the cultural context. What is he really saying when he says, "Let me go bury my father"? And I read up on this because I don't know Middle Eastern culture just off the top of my head. So I read about what this meant. And it's amazing when you read, people still today in the Middle East will use terms just like this. And essentially what it meant, from one commentator, he said that this is a figure of speech that meant that he wanted to stay home and fulfill his family responsibilities and help his father until his father died. Okay? So it's not just having a funeral, because in those times, if somebody died, you're not waiting till next week or so to bury them. You got to bury them right then and there. They didn't embalm or any of that stuff, okay? So that's not what he's asking. He's saying, "Jesus, I will follow you, but let me just finish out this time with my dad. He's still alive and I need to help out at home, and then I'll come follow you." It's possible that he was also thinking about his inheritance. Maybe I'll wait till I get my inheritance from my father when he dies, and then I'll have money that'll help me on the road when I follow Jesus all over the place. Maybe that's what he was thinking. But Jesus answers him very clearly. He makes it clear that the call of the gospel is more important than anything. Like that word, anything. That's literal. I'm using that word literally. Anything. The call of the gospel is more important than anything in the world. He says, "Let the dead bury their own dead." That's another figure of speech that simply meant, let the world take care of worldly things. Let the spiritually dead deal with what is spiritually dead. Let the world take care of the world. You're not called to worldly things. You're called to heavenly things. You're called to the gospel, because that's his mission. And if you're following him, that's your mission. And everything else is at least second, if not third, fourth, fifth, and so on in place to Christ. I mean, listen to this other line in Luke 14:26, what Jesus said. Listen to this. He said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sister, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Oh my goodness. Now we know he doesn't mean to literally hate them, because he says elsewhere that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. So we understand how the Bible is working and how God's word works with God's word to help us know the truth. What is he saying? He's saying that every other person in your life, your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, everything, everyone you need to love them, but your love for them shouldn't compare to the love you have for the Lord. And as your love for your family grows, your love for God should grow exponentially more. And that is possible. I've seen it. I've experienced it some, and that's what I am seeking to grow in the Lord myself. It doesn't mean that you love your family less. It just means as you love your family more, you are exponentially growing in your love for God. That's how the gospel works in our lives. His whole point is simply this, y'all, is that you cannot live two lives. You can't follow him and live for yourself or for your mom and for your dad, or parents, you cannot live for your children. You cannot live for your children. I was in Disney World, y'all, and I saw the world on display. And I took my children to Disney World, and we met Darth Vader, and we met Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and we went on rides, and it was wonderful and beautiful and amazing. But when my kids said, I want to do this, we said, oh, that's a very interesting thing that you just said. Very interesting that you want to do things. Too bad, because we can't do that. And they would say, oh, can I please go do this? If we could go do it, okay, yeah, we can go do that. Yeah, thank you for asking the right way. But if we couldn't, we'd have to say, hey, I'm so sorry. You still have to ask the right way, but the answer is still no, because it's already 9:30 at night. We got to go to bed. Like, what are you, crazy? You see, if you live for your children, you will ruin your children. If you live for your spouse, you will ruin your spouse. If you live for yourself, you will ruin yourself. Have you ever heard of the wagon of rocks? This illustration. It's really good. I'm going to tweak it a little bit. But it goes like this. God asked the man to carry 3 rocks in his wagon up a hill to a certain spot. God gives them specific directions. He says, these 3 rocks, this wagon, here's how you go up the hill. Guy goes, oh, yeah, I can do that. Got it. Thank you, Lord. And as the man goes, he comes across more rocks on the path that looked very similar to his own. And he thinks to himself, man, these 3 rocks are good. Like, what if I have 4? What if I have 5? What if I have 6, 10, 20? These are the same kind of rocks. They're really, really good. And God shows up because the man is pulling this wagon up the hill, and he eventually gets so tired, he just can't pull it anymore. It's so heavy, and he thinks about letting it go. God shows up and he asks, what is all this? And the man goes, these are really awesome rocks, just like the ones that you gave me. And God says, you thought that these rocks were important, but I only asked you to bring up the 3. You are prioritizing things that I never asked you to prioritize, and it is slowing you down. There are many of us Christians who claim to follow Christ, but are unwilling to prioritize their own faith. And I'm talking about church. Yeah, I'm talking about going to church. Y'all, going to church is not just like going to, get ice cream or something. It's like a major part of who we are in the family of God. Going to church, time in the Word, spending time with God in His Word and letting Him grow you. I've already read that before. I already read the whole Bible. Who cares? You already ate bread. Are you never going to eat bread again? No, we need this daily. It's the daily bread, isn't it? We need this. I'm talking about holiness, growing in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you think, the way you interact with people. You are holy in the way that you live. There's so many Christians that say, I follow Jesus, but we're not willing to prioritize our own faith. What's amazing, it's so rare, y'all. It's so rare for Jesus to ask you to say no to literally everything in your life, okay? That almost never happens. All right, I'm a pastor of the gospel, and I got to take my family to Disney World, okay? And some of y'all might be like, oh, you should never do that. Well, I have my conscience, you have your conscience, and we do what God's called us to do, right? But here's the thing. He's almost never going to say, you can't do anything, ever. That almost never happens. But if you can't say no to anything, then you aren't really following Jesus. If you cannot say no to anything that you want in your life, then you are not really following Jesus. You are not a Christian. You are not saved. You need to think about that. So what are you saying yes to that makes you say no to Christ? What are you saying yes to in your life that makes you say no to growing in your faith? Flip it. Say no to those things and say yes to Christ. Because what's going to happen, it's scary. I know, it's scary. We're scared to say no to those things. Like our work, right? We're scared to do that. We're scared to live this out because we know it's going to cost us some things. But here's what's going to happen, y'all. Point number 3. Christ's control will dispel our fears. It's scary, but do it. Because when you go with him, you are going to see his power on display, and it will dispel your fears. Look at this last interaction we see. And I had to keep these together. Some people separate them, but he says, let's get on the boat. And then he has these 2 conversations, and then they get on the boat, right? Verse 23, he got into the boat, and what happened? His disciples followed him. They heard what he said, and they said, okay, yeah, let's go. I mean, let's get in the boat. They get in the boat, and behold, great storm on the sea arises, and I could go into all of the details about how that happened on the Sea of Galilee. If you're like, that could never happen on the Sea of Galilee, then come talk to me later, and I'll tell you why it could. But the point is, there was a great storm. These fishermen start getting afraid, but what is it? Jesus himself was asleep. And you're like, it's impossible for somebody to be asleep on a boat like that while it's storming. Well, some Sundays after preaching and doing all the things, you just feel like you're dead, okay? I take really hard naps on Sunday. And so Jesus had been ministering. He was super duper tired. We know what it's like to be tired like this. He was super duper tired. They came to him, woke him up and said, save us, Lord, we're perishing. In Mark, it actually says that they said to him, don't you care that we're perishing? So they're kind of like, Jesus, you don't even care. And Jesus gets up, he says, why are you afraid? And the literal translation of that is, why are you being cowards? I love that, literally, in my footnotes, afraid, cowardly, you men of little faith. Then he gets up, he rebukes the winds and the sea, it becomes perfectly calm. And they were amazed. I said, oh, what kind of man is this? I don't think we knew who we were following. See, when you rely on Jesus to be in control in your day in, day out living, his presence will be there. And it will powerfully calm your fears and anxieties, just like he calmed the sea. See, Christ was calm because he was in control. Why aren't we calm? Why do we get frustrated? Why do we freak out when things aren't going the way we want them to? Because we are not in control. The disciples were not calm. They were losing their minds because they were not in control. I mean, they were the fishermen. They knew how to be on the sea. And even they were losing their minds. There are times in our lives where you might think, yeah, I've experienced it all. God can still top that. So don't ever think, oh, I've experienced it all. These experienced fishermen had never experienced this before. You see, they still didn't fully trust in who Jesus was. They were still worried. They believed him. They went to him. They said, Jesus, we're fishermen. We need you. You're the carpenter, but you're something different. We need you, but we are freaking out, man. And Jesus calls them out, and he points out the fact that they had weak faith. They didn't realize that he was the Son of Man and the Son of God. See, the only other person who ever calms seas is God himself, right? Makes you think of Job I'm sorry, not Job, of Jonah. When Jonah is in the boat and he says, listen guys, I'm the reason why the storm is happening. You got to toss me out. And they toss him out of the boat. And what happens? Calm. Makes you think of the psalm that we just read, Psalm 107, where God is the one who calms the seas. He's the only one who can do that. Jesus is the Son of God. And the men finally, they see this and they are more afraid of Jesus than they were of the waves. See, the disciples had a weakness that Jesus wanted to expose and grow. And that's what we need to understand. You see, it is good to have your weakness exposed so that you can be strengthened. Really quick, I'm doing CrossFit right now. We're working out, we're loving it, it's fun. If you don't know what CrossFit is, essentially it's a blend of traditional weightlifting and cardio and circuit training. So every time you go, you feel like you die, okay? That's basically what it means, all right? Kind of joking, but there are times where I'm like, I gotta slow down. This is crazy. And the reason why I'm enjoying it is because I used to only ever do traditional weightlifting. This is forcing me to do exercises I would never think to do, and it is exposing areas where I am weak. And I get to focus on those areas to get stronger. And it's very similar in our faith. See, Jesus said, follow me, and then he took his disciples into a storm. Think about that. Jesus brought them into it. See, God is going to walk you into situations in life to show you where you don't trust him. Man, I feel that. I know that. God is walking me through life, and he is exposing all of the areas where I don't trust him. You might be able to look at areas in your life like, I trust God there, I trust God there, I trust God there, I trust God there. Yeah, well, there are places where you are not fully trusting him. And if you want to trust him fully, you got to walk with him. He will take you there. And that's what you want. The key is understanding that getting stronger isn't that you are just better at being a Christian. No, the key to getting stronger is understanding that you are depending on him more instead of depending on yourself. Because the disciples were depending on themselves and what they knew how to do. But Jesus gets up and he says, you need to understand I'm in control, and you don't have to be in control. You see, we can be calm when we have faith in him. When you are trusting the Lord in those areas, think about it. Think about those areas in your life that cause you anxiety. Don't think about the ones where you're like, oh yeah, I totally trust God with this. Okay, think about the areas in your life where you would freak out if this happened. What you need to understand is that ultimately that means you're not trusting him with that. Instead of saying, yeah, I need to trust him more with this thing, you need to say, Lord, I'm struggling to trust you with this. Will you please grow my faith? Because I am weak and sometimes cowardly. That's why I feel these things inside. But I need you to calm my heart the way you can calm the seas. Please grow my faith. That's what Jesus promised. John 14:27, he says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Man, walking with Jesus means you can go into the middle of any trial and be calmed. You see, when we are anxious, it's because we're not trusting the power of Christ in our lives. He knew what he was taking the disciples into, and what did he say? He said, let's go. Get in the boat. Let's go. And Jesus knows the trial that he is taking you through, and he is saying, let's go. He sees the cancer that you don't even know about, and he says, I got you. Let's go. He sees the loved ones that you've lost, and he says, I've got you. Let's go. He sees how hard life can be day in, day out, raising children and grandchildren. Maybe you're a grandparent and you're raising your grandchildren. He sees how hard it is day in and day out, and he says, I got you. Let's go. Keep following me, because I will calm the stormy heart. And I will take you all the way to your desired haven. It's scary to follow Jesus because we know it takes sacrifice. But when you say no to yourself and you say yes to him, his power will be there in your life, and he will calm your fears and grow your faith. So if Jesus is saying, let's go to you for the very first time, and you've never put your faith in him, stop trying to be in control. Say no to yourself and turn to him. Say, yes, Jesus, I need you. But if you've already said yes to him, and as a Christian, you aren't saying yes to him in every area of your life, you're still trying to live something for yourself. You still think that you've got to figure this out on your own, that out on your own, this out on your own, that out on your own. Say no to that lie and say yes. And let's go. Let's pray.